Okay. Oh, let's see if I get this right. Okay. Sorry, I gotta go back and. Okay, there we go. Okay, so this is a presentation that I gave a few years ago. I'm not sharing it? Oh, it says I'm screen sharing. So maybe I'm screen sharing the wrong thing.
You're screen sharing.
Yeah. Did that change? Or is it still
Nope,
the ugly guys with a fish?
it's still the
Okay.
same picture.
Okay, so I gotta go share the correct thing here. Oh, come on. When I get okay, there we go. I think you think it's this one I need to do? Yes, that one. This one. Okay. Oh yeah, there it is. Record next. Okay, so first of all, you can look at this picture and you can say that this is a fake, right? The teeth aren't quite right on it. And the main problem with this, well, two problems. One is these things have been extinct about 7 million years. And the other thing is that that fish is too small because these fish were very, very large. Now, part of what Karen Clausen found, well, when we finally got all of our specimens together, is that originally in the original classification paper and in a couple other papers, these things have been estimated to be somewhere between 8 and 10 feet long. The ones that it looks like the ones that we've been digging up at the Vibert Quarry. So all these come from a private quarry out in Central Oregon, owned by the Vibert family. Vibert family is an old family in the area of Madras. When they stopped publishing uh, telephone directories, there was over 100 Vibert families listed in Madras. And they are now on their 7th generation. So they're an old established family. And one guy in the family owns this gravel quarry. Where was I going for that? Oh, well, anyway. And so that's where the type specimen came from, is this gravel quarry. Originally, they were digging. There was this patch of gravel showing up on the side of a. They have the agency plains, which is a big lava flow, which is where all the farming occurs there in the Madras area, because it's irrigated from the Deschutes River, a big program they put in the 30s. And on the side of the talus slope coming down from the lava, you've got a patch of gravel, big patch of gravel, a couple of city blocks, basically. And so they dug originally, they used some of that gravel for local farm roads. They put a little bit of state road in with it. And that was in the 50s, I understand. And then they started the Vibert kids, who are now more than older than I am, well, about the same age I am, started finding fish bones in the gravel, particularly backbones and some teeth. And they got a hold of the University of Oregon, and they eventually went up and did some excavations and came up with the type specimen, the original specimen. They dug it up in the late 60s and published it in 1972. So this is not something that we have discovered. So, but they were large, and they didn't quite describe them correctly. At least is a funny story later on. So these fish were not carnivores. Well, they were kind of carnivores. They were filter feeders. They lived in the Miocene. During the Miocene, we have a period where the ocean was much more productive than it is now. In other words, it had a lot more plankton than it did now. All through the Miocene, the temperature was getting colder and colder and colder. And somewhere around the end of the Miocene, all of a sudden the productivity in the oceans went way down. They lost a lot of their plankton. But until then, there was enough plankton to support a lot of different types of filter feeders. Not only this type of salmon, but many other filter feeders evolved to eat that food and then were quite prevalent during the Miocene. A couple of smaller salmon, Oncorhynchus salix, Oncorhynchus ketopus, also plankton made up a large part of their diet. They're more like sockeye and chum, and they were mostly found in the Snake River. This productivity was called the late Miocene biogenic bloom. And somehow it decreased. The dates of when it was really when the decrease occurred varies, but it looks like it started tapering off about 9 million years ago, and by about 2 million years ago, the ocean was right about at the same productivity it is today. So sometime in that period, these salmon became extinct. So here's a little data about the bloom. Let me see. It's kind of best illustrated. Oh, that doesn't show. Oh, there we go. Kind of best illustrated by this one, showing that it was a lot more productive and then it went down with time from about 9 million to about 2 million years ago. Anyway, that may have led to their extinction. So some of you folks were on the salmon digs. The salmon have been found, specimens of, or part specimens of these salmon have been found everywhere from the main stem Columbia up in here to, I guess, they found some right where, pieces of them right where the Deschutes enters into the Columbia River. They got the main quarry here at the Vibert Quarry. And they've been found in various places in California. Undoubtedly, they were widespread on the West Coast, but we just lack fossil localities for them. So, you know, I can't imagine, or I imagine these animals were in the Fraser River and many of the other coastal rivers. You know, they could have swum up the Nehalem, maybe. I don't know. And all the others, but we just don't have fossil localities for them. So where we've been finding the specimens and digging them up is the Vibert's Quarry. So this is a picture of the wall. That wall's 60, 70 feet tall of lightly cemented gravel. It goes down to a flat floor because the bottom of the gravel ended at there's a lahar right underneath it, and they dug it out till it hit the volcanic lahar at the bottom and didn't bother digging any more than that because it wasn't a source of gravel. So my guess is, so there's a picture of the whole face of the quarry. You can see the nicely laminated flows of gravel. Most of that gravel is fist to head size. So to give you some scale, but there is sand in there as well. And it goes up quite a ways, and then there's a big area of ash deposit and lava on top of that. My best guess is this was a braided river. There's only a couple of ways that you get a land deposit of sediment. And the two ways are alluvial fans, where a river will come down and dump into a basin, think of Death Valley, and build up a big fan or partial cone-shaped deposit, which then can get buried later on. The other way you get a land deposit of sedimentary rock is a braided river. And a braided river occurs when rock washes into the river bed faster than it erodes out. So they're found, a lot of them are found at the outlets of glaciers, a glacial outlet. This one in New Zealand there's glaciers up there in those mountains, making lots of gravel, filling up the rivers. Characteristic of a braided river is its flat bottom, and it's made out of unconsolidated sediment, i.e. gravel and sand. And so the river splits and recombines. Not only does it look like a braid, but it also moves around. It takes very little force for the water to move sideways. So they're all the time, these little channels are moving sideways, combining with other ones, splitting from other ones, and churning over the gravel and filling it in. So imagine this happening, at least in this part of the Deschutes River, maybe 7 million years ago. So here we are digging. This is our 2022 dig. A couple of you may recognize your hard hats. So basically, we identified, or let's be honest, I identified some bones sticking out of the, or at least apparent on the surface of the gravel. And that's not easy to do because the gravel is, has a lot of funny round shapes and brown colors. And so we identified a whole bunch of specimens, and we went in 2022 and dug out a whole bunch. And 2023, we went back and dug up some more. I've since identified a couple more specimens. One came out in pieces last year because we're digging in the tunnels that we dug in 2023 and 2022.
Digging tunnels.
Excuse me? Digging tunnels. Oh, yeah.
I'm curious. Yeah. Why are you digging tunnels?
Well, that's the only way to get them out of the cliff. So here's some pictures of what they might have looked like by our favorite artist, Ray Troll. Down at the University of Oregon, they have a life-size one on the left. So there's a flat illustration underneath it and a life-size sculpture by a guy named Gary Staub hanging from the ceiling up above. You got to have fossils hanging from the ceiling. And then the one on the right-hand side is one of Ray Troll's specimen drawings from everything saber-tooth, because at that time, well, okay, I'll get to the story a little later. Teaser. Okay, so I got the first specimen was found in the 50s or the late 60s. The type specimen was dug up, I think, 68, something like that. Classification, or maybe 64. 64 it says here. The classification paper was published in 1972 by Cavendish and Miller, Cavender and Miller from the University of Oregon. So that was a type specimen, and it was actually only a part skull. A very fine specimen was collected in 1980 by a guy named Reuben Holman. He was just a amateur paleontologist working. He lives in the Midwest and was working out here temporarily for a couple of years, drove through a rock shop in Madras and asked if there are any fossils around here. And they said, well, and they described the quarry. So he went out there and got a very fine skull, backbones, and ribs, and all sorts of things. That's what that 3D print is made from, his Reuben Holman specimen. It is still the best specimen, in spite of the ones that we've found. It's down at OMSI, if you ever want to see it. In 2011, or 2010, 2010, Tim Fisher visited the quarry and saw some backbones. In 2011, my daughter and I went there and refound the same backbones. Tim was trying to get somebody at the University of Oregon interested in collecting it and was unsuccessful. Gave up in disgust, I think. I had a pretty good, when we found him in 2011, we had a pretty good relationship with Ed Davis by then and got with him, and they excavated actually 2 sets of backbones side by side in 2011. And we had to leave whatever they were hooked to because Ed Davis was getting rather concerned about the overhang. When we went back in 2014 and excavated the rest of it, which was 2 skulls laying side by side, touching each other. It's kind of romantic in a paleo sort of way. In 2022, we found another 7 specimens that we dug up, the NARG group dug up, and I prepped them. They're all from the same spawning season because they're in the same kind of semi-continuous sand layer. In 2023, we found some more. And actually, we were digging them from 3 different places in the quarry, but most of them come from that one spawning event. In 2025, last year, I found in the back of the hole that we left from 2022, I found another specimen, and then digging that out, we found a couple more. Since we're inside digging in a tunnel, they don't come out real well. So in total, up to now, we have about 18 specimens with 14 skulls come out of that one gravel quarry. And the only other articulated skull is recovered from an estuary deposit in California. And it's actually bigger than any of the ones we found. So and talk a little bit more about the Reuben's specimen. So one of the interesting things, the original specimen, the teeth have big root balls to attach them, but they are not real strongly attached to the maxilla, to the bone. They evidently grow in the estuaries. When they're out getting big, and growing in the ocean, they evidently don't have, or those teeth are small, but they grow and get large in the estuaries when the animals get ready to go up and spawn. Since they're not tightly attached to the main skull. And the type specimen, those teeth had, and the root balls had fallen off, which is quite common. And when they drew the picture of them for the classification paper, they drew them with the teeth pointing down. And hence, it got its nickname, the saber-tooth salmon. But Reuben's specimen and the specimens that we've, oh, by the way, our club helped buy that Reuben specimen for the University of Oregon. Anyway, those specimens had the teeth in place, and the teeth turned out to point sideways, horizontally out of the upper jaw. Well, that made a big revision, to what these animals looked like and what they used their teeth for, such that they actually hired Gary Staub to come back and revise the big sculpture at the University of Oregon. They took it down, he cut the teeth off and remounted them properly. So any illustration you see of one of these salmon with the teeth pointing down was made 2014 or earlier. Anyone that shows it pointing sideways was 2015 or later. So we've got a firm date as to when the teeth changed. So I'm going to skip here. Here's just a quiz. So there's some pictures from fairly close up of a couple salmon bones before we started. Can you figure out where they were? How many people? You were on the digs. You were on the digs, weren't you on the digs? No, you guys weren't. Anyway, there's one. That's part of a skull. And that's a backbone. But I tell you, they're really hard to find. So here's some of the other things that we found. Not only did we find bones, but during the preparation I found, well, background, this is a lot of the sediment, the sand and stuff was really fresh volcanic ash. Volcanic ash degrades very quickly to clay. And in some of these specimens, we had places where there was tissue, and the tissue decayed away, leaving a gap between the sediments and the bones. And those gaps sometimes got filled in with this whitish clay. You know, this would have had to happen just within a couple of years. And so we have soft tissue impressions left. And in particular, we've got some tails and fins. Well, tails are fins, but we have fins. And we have one, I don't think I've got a picture of it, that's a whole side of the salmon, about 2 feet long, where the rock just peeled right off, leaving the clay layer same shape as the body of the salmon. The most remarkable thing. So I'll tell you a secret. This is something that we're still not talking about too much publicly. But in 2023, or 2022, excuse me, in a different location in the quarry, I found some small salmon. They were still saber-toothed salmon. You can see by the teeth in this picture, typical of what saber-toothed salmon are. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Uh-oh, I've got my automatic feed forward going on. Anyway, but these are only about 2 feet long. And what we believe it is that these are jack salmon, the equivalent of jack salmon. Jack salmon are a phenomena where some of the males mature sexually early before they're fully grown, and they come on back and they spawn. And there's sometimes called sneaker salmon because they're small enough they don't necessarily evoke the big fight response. And depending upon which run it is, it's 3 to 10% of the males come back early. So this, as far as we know, is the first recorded first paleontology evidence of sneaker salmon. Here's some more pictures of the little tinies. That's an irregular exacto. So you can see how much smaller these animals were. Here's one of the jack salmon was entire, all the way, the whole thing. Beautiful big preservations. These were prepped with a paintbrush. So we don't talk about that too much. In 2013, we got, of course, some more of them. We had one big block that contained 2 specimens. We knew that because they had 2 backbones going into it. There was actually a section of a 3rd specimen in there as well, a 3rd backbone. So that one had 2 skulls and 3 backbones in it. I have a video of it, but I'm going to go on by. So here's some loose bones we found. This is a gill plate. That's three-dimensional preservation, and it is the most beautiful bone I've ever worked with. Again, prepared with a paintbrush and a little bit of air abrasive. I'm not going to go through that sort of stuff. So one of the lessons is that science is always changing. It's not a record made in, well, it is kind of a record in stone. But we get new data, and like the teeth orientation is new data, and we have to change our minds, our hypotheses about things. And climate change can make a big difference, because that's probably what made the difference in the ocean circulation, which then influenced the amount of photoplankton around. So in 2025, Karen Clausen, she's a fish paleontologist from the Philadelphia School of Osteopathic Medicine. She teaches anatomy. Spent her fall sabbatical at the University of Oregon. She's going to be the lead author of a new paper talking about all these new specimens, because none of these specimens, the 2011 none of them have actually been published in a scientific journal. So we've got 18, 19, 20 specimens to talk about. So the three main takeaways from her recent work, I was really hoping she'd be here tonight. One, but she's not. So there is a distinct sexual dimorphism in the salmon. It's what I would call subtle, but I guess for paleontologists, it's as distinct as you can get. It has to do with the angle of this part of the head. Some are narrower and some are wider, depending upon whether they're male or female. And don't ask me which one was which. I don't remember. So now we can look at them. All the specimens have the teeth. So it's not that, and their teeth are roughly all the same size. So that's not a good indicator, but that angle in the skull is. So now we got sexual dimorphism. The specimens from Madras are smaller than the previously estimated size. So they estimated the sizes of 8 to 10 feet based on the diameter and thickness of the backbones and the size of the skulls. Well, when we pulled out stuff, we had some pretty complete big specimens. They were missing the tails, but you can count up how many backbones there are and how many you expect to find in the whole animal. And so they were pretty complete, and they ended up being about 6 feet long. One of them was only about 4 feet long. So we don't know if that is the original estimates were wrong, or because some of the backbones that they find in other locations are significantly bigger than the ones we find at Madras. So it's a good chance that what we have is a different run of fish that was just smaller than the big ones found other places in the West Coast. So you can consider them to be dwarf giant salmon. And we have now a clear idea of how old they were, because it turns out in modern salmon, if you look at the backbone, now these backbones here are not really good enough to tell that. If you look at the backbone end on, you can see distinct rings. Those rings do not line up with the internal structure of the backbone, but the rings are indicative of the age of the animal. You see 4 rings, that animal was 4 years old. The internal structure does not reflect that. So what is more reliable is just looking at the darn things. So we now know that these big salmon were 6 to 7 years old. Some of them had 6 rings, some had 7. So they're growing to 6 feet, maybe as big as 10 feet in 6 years, 6, 7 years. The small jack salmon, they were 2 and 3 years old. And here is a lot of the specimens we've collected and prepared sitting there at the University of Oregon. It's just a marvelous spectrum. That's not all of them, but that's we've got skulls, pieces, articulated backbones. So this is the block that had 2 skulls and 3 backbones. Well, this skull goes with this set of backbones. This skull goes with this set of backbones. So that's why I'm saying we know roughly how long they would be, because that one would be about 4 feet long. This one would be about 6.5 feet long. And then over here, which we didn't talk about in other public, these are the jack salmon here in the darker colored sand. So that's all I got. Yep, that's it. So is there any questions or comments from you guys? See if I can find the, come on. There are still salmon in the quarry, yes. Oops. Probably not. Oh, yeah. Okay, I need to stop the share. I need to find my cursor. There it is. There it is. Okay, we can stop share. That'll. And we can stop the recording.